Good afternoon, good morning. I guess technically it's afternoon. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Pan Dulce. This is the special edition Festivus episode. So I want to thank everyone for joining us who are watching now and those who are going to be watching us later. Those on our Coffee and Pan Dulce page, also on YouTube and our other outlets in Massachusetts and everywhere else that we're being seen. So we're going to get right to it, and I want to thank everyone for joining us just a couple days before Christmas. And let's go ahead and introduce our neighbors today. And so who wants to go first?
Age before beauty.
I'm Christian Cano, by the way. So go ahead.
My name's Jeff Scott, and this is my second appearance here. I'm keeping track. And I look forward to the discussion this morning. So,
Well, welcome, Jeff.
thank you.
Again.
And I'm Tony Foreman. This is also my second appearance, and I need to let you know that I'm glad to be a part of this team. I think that the discussions that we have, the issues that we cover are pertinent to the education of the constituency so that they could be more aware of what it is that's going on and what we could bring to the table in terms of helping people discern what's going on.
Should we take our simultaneous
Yes,
sip
here we go.
together?
Ceremonial.
Welcome. Salute.
Salud.
Mm-mm-mm. Well, we want to say that we are missing Mrs. Ruth Perez, who normally is one of our neighbors, and unfortunately she has mom duties today, and so she was not able. This is a special edition, and we probably won't have another show until right before the new year, and I'm sure they'll be even more exciting. So today's special edition, what we wanted to talk about was the NCO9 Fair special elections. But we don't have enough material on that because of the fact that they're still trying to decide what they're going to do. So then we decided to add something really nice, and it's just called the Festivus edition. For those of us who remember Festivus, or even remember Festivus from the Seinfeld episode, it actually, I did some research last night, and Festivus actually started, the writer who wrote that episode, his dad, started Festivus like in 1966, and it was something, I don't know if it was done as a joke, and then the son who is wrote on Seinfeld decided to do that special episode, and they called it Festivus. So it was a secular tradition that was, I guess, started it a little bit out of humor, but then it became kind of a cult thing, I assume. Anyway, so
Yeah.
there is history. I thought it was just something that was on the Seinfeld show. But so anyway, so those who are Seinfeld fans like I am, but also have curious about the Festivus episode. So let's go ahead and jump right very quickly into. Oh, before we do that, let's talk about button of the week. Anybody got buttons? American flag.
I forgot my button.
My button of the
Let
week
him
is.
one of yours.
That's my
Yes,
that's my
there
first
you go.
that's my first grievance.
That's right. You gave me the secret out. My button of the week is the Sierra Club. First week was Moms Demand Action. Next week was Latinx Voters. And this is the Sierra Club. Sierra Club does a lot of wonderful things all around the United States, but also here in North Carolina. They're very active in the Coal Ash, in the getting involved in CMS. I'm not sure if that's their official capacity. But we want to thank the Sierra Club because of the work they have done, and also groups like 350 Rise. Our Charlotte City Council just voted on some, I don't know if it was not really an ordinance, I guess a resolution to try to get off of fossil fuels in Charlotte. We'll get more homework on that. But I know that was something that was a really big deal that was done Monday night, and it was a unanimous vote. Got the support from the mayor and everyone, and it was a lot of hard work behind the scenes. So, and also, once again, our imaginary buttons, if one of us is talking too long, which I probably am already, you just push your imaginary button, and you at home, you can push your imaginary button. So,
If I were wearing a button,
yes.
it would be from the musical The Legend of Georgia McBride, which was a musical at the Actors Theater of Charlotte. And
Oh.
so this season, of course, they've got about 6 shows left from their American Trailer Park musical. And so I strongly believe in local theater. So I think that if people are looking for fun, exciting adult night out,
Yeah.
they should check out the Actors Theater of Charlotte because they do some very challenging theater during the year. So it's very important to expand your mind.
I had forgotten how cultured you were.
Oh, well.
I was talking about going to see Vice last night.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just you know, I had that button at home and it was
Sure.
on my table, and it was a great graphic. They do some great artwork
Okay.
too, for their yeah, they've got great stages on
Sure.
it and everything, and it's at Queen's University
Oh,
in
wow.
Charlotte. Yeah, so just
Excellent.
wanna,
Thank you
just
for-
wanna
thank
put
you
in
for
plug
sharing that.
that,
So,
yeah.
Tony, out of
Yeah.
fairness,
Yeah.
if you had a button, what would your button be this week? Who do you want to promote this week?
It wouldn't be Let's Make America Great Again.
Yeah. 4 minutes into the show and our first zinger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I support many efforts, but one of the things I'm a former Boy Scout,
Mhm.
and I support it as much as I can,
Mhm.
and that would be one of the buttons that I would wear. If I had one.
Okay, that's a good button. I thank you for bringing that one up. So let's go ahead and get into our questions for the day, which we're not going to answer all these obviously because there's so much going on. But you know, everyone's been talking about it.
Yeah.
Finally, for probably the first time since this all started several weeks ago, the Democratic nominee has finally started to send emails out to say it's very likely we're going to have a new election.
Yes.
Up until this week, everyone else was asking for a new election and speculating a new election, but the Democratic nominee hadn't even said anything about a new election. But it's been raising money like,
Yeah.
my goodness gracious, we've got like
That's right.
15 emails just in 1 week. So I guess the first question is, it looks like 99.9%, unless something happens, that there's probably going to be some type of new election. We won't know until the North Carolina Board of Election meets on January the 11th, I believe, is the
Right.
date they have set.
And that's a Friday.
It's a Friday, yes. And I know there's already groups that are planned to be at there. They're coming from Progress North Carolina is organizing people. I'm sure people in the 9th Congressional District organizing people. So I guess the question is, who will be impacted if there's an election? And let's just go under the assumption, because that's, even though I think it's going to be a primary election,
Mm-hmm.
let's go under the assumption that regardless if it's a primary election or if it, in other words, an election from scratch, or if it's going to be just between the nominees, which would impact you. And I need to add, because this was asked of me a week and a half ago, have we invited on this show someone from Mark Harris's group and also someone from Dan McCready's group, because Jeff, you're the one who has
Yeah.
been accepting the invitations. Yes, we have, and I've said it even last week. We even posted on the Indivisible 9 pages and so forth, you know, casting call. We need someone who would like to talk on behalf of Dan McCready. Anybody who supports Dan McCready.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough for me because I'm here as a voter,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
And I want to think about, well, there are other voters who are disappointed
Mm-hmm.
about what's going on and see that they're not going to have representation for as long as this drags out.
Sure.
And so I'm certainly sympathetic to that. I'm in the same spot. So, but I'm also here obviously as a candidate,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to think about my own candidacy and how that might, and how it might impact. So I've got a campaign message, but
Sure.
also I think our state party
Mm-hmm.
and our national party should be stepping up at some
Sure.
point and saying, making a statement about what's going on. So
Mhm.
it's not clear what our angle is because we don't know all the facts yet.
Yeah.
So we know what we read in the papers. We
Mhm.
know there's been a lot of very good coverage. You know, everybody's on this and everybody's doing the investigations deeply into some of the characters and what's been going on historically. But we really don't know what's happening behind the scenes
Sure.
with
And
the
I'm sure there's a lot.
with the district attorneys
Yep.
and also with the Board of Elections. So,
Sure.
you know, I think we have to
It's-
respect the fact that there's an investigation on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. Tony, you have
Rowan County is part of the 9th Congressional.
Rowan?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay.
No.
There was a town hall meeting held last night. I don't know if you guys
Mhm.
seen it.
Yeah, that was in Richmond. Was it in Richmond?
Something like that.
I think it was in Richmond. It may have been in Robeson. Remember Robeson?
I-
It was Progress North Carolina and a bunch of other groups had one that would talk about this,
yeah,
right?
even the
Yeah.
NAACP.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And I was amazed to see that there were so many people from the community and the constituency that were actually concerned about the trajectory in which this was going.
Yeah.
Um,
Meaning,
the election,
Oh,
whether
sure,
whether
sure.
there was
Yeah.
going to be an election or not.
yeah.
There were people that were testifying about their experience with their ballots.
Sure.
Ballots, and there was somebody that was part of the what's his name?
Mark Harris?
Mark Harris's
Okay.
group that was taking people's written ballots, and he was telling them he had to have them authenticated,
Oh,
which I never heard of.
sure, yeah.
And he was taking them, and he said, "I'll be back." And the lady said, "I never seen him again."
Wow.
So obviously,
Yeah.
there's been some things there that were not correct.
Yeah, well, we know this, right, and we, we've discussed this in past weeks and offline, you know, we know this has been going on a long time, we know that the company, Red Dome and Dallas and all those other people associated with this, with aggressive get out the vote efforts, we know that this has been going on for a long time. So I think I mentioned last week or the week before that from Harris's point of view, in his public statements, you know, it doesn't make sense for him to come out with anything that, you know, that says, yes, I hired this guy and
Sure.
he told me what he was going to do was illegal. You know, no one's gonna hire someone if they tell them they're going to
Right,
do something
right.
illegal, right? And so he's got, when he gets, however his statement appears, or whether he's questioned on the 11th, or who's ever talking to him through his lawyers, he's never going to say,
Sure.
yes, I hired this person or I hired this company, knowing
Yeah.
that they had illegal practices.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Well-
it's incumbent on the board
Sure.
and the
Yes.
district attorneys to prove that, and
Sure.
that's not just Harris. That's anybody who's hired them.
Sure,
and,
I mean,
and
that-
won it, and the numbers look fishy.
That would be, yeah, I mean, that would be logical for anyone.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
think that would be the, but one of the things I'll have to say is that I think the Dan McCready group, they're doing a really good job of keeping this in the spotlight, keeping the focus on Harris, on how they're in attack mode, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're doing a really good job because Harris is being so quiet. I think that they have an advantage that they can pretty much say whatever they want to say, and Harris is not going to come out. They're almost like trying to bait him into kind of coming out.
Yeah.
And
Which is not.
Yeah.
but this is what I was going to say is they learned something from the last election. Dan was really quiet during his election. It was hard to get him to say anything.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I think that Mark Harris had an advantage when he was talking about certain things, and Dan would not kind of respond to those. So
Which you
this is
complained
different.
about a lot.
Yes,
Well,
I did. I was like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
where
and I
is-
complained about it too,
Yes.
right?
So
Yeah, you did.
And we can both complain about it again right now,
Yes.
right?
So it's interesting to see the strategy changing, which I have to say I kind of like the fact that Dan McCready and his group are, you know, moving forward and doing the things that you would want them to do to keep this. Now,
Well,
I think what it does is it keeps the people who supported Dan McCready interested and exciting. I don't think it has any impact on the people who support Mark Harris or you
Yeah.
or other people, because I think most people, and we talked about this in the other shows as well, and I think people that we talk to out in our neighborhoods, you know, we've already said that this was a bad situation, but we were not surprised if this hasn't happened before in 2016 or whatever the case may be. So I think most people have gone to their corners and they basically said, if you're a supporter of Mark Harris, and I heard this on Monday night when I was watching the Panthers play, you know, that Mark Harris did not know anything about it and so forth. So if you support Mark Harris, you're in that kind of
Yeah.
denial I would think.
Yeah.
You know, no, he didn't.
That
he couldn't have
reminds
done
me
it.
of someone.
Well, no, it's
Well-
that's true, but that's what the base is. We talk
Yeah,
about the
that's
base
right.
supports
Yeah.
you when you're
So,
wrong.
so I have no problem with McCready's campaign.
Sure.
You know, continuing to agitate and
Mhm.
continuing to keep his
That's what he's supposed to do.
keep his base to
Right.
keep his
Yeah.
base fired
At this
up.
point,
Sure.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, I haven't done that. I don't have the means to do that because I don't want to necessarily be raising money if
Sure.
I don't know what's going to go on. Right? He's got the luxury of being able to, you know, raise money to do this.
Mhm.
So having said that, I think I disagree with the fact that he's doing something different, because if you think of what he did during the general election, is he tended to avoid confrontation,
Yes, he did.
and that was a big problem. It was certainly, and it wasn't just a problem for me. We all noticed it. You know,
Sure.
Kenny Smith noticed it. The Charlotte Observer noticed it. You noticed
Yes.
it.
I
And
noticed
so,
it.
yeah, you noticed it. So this is pretty clear. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me for him to be griping about voters and voters being disenfranchised or alienated
When he
or
didn't-
somehow
when he didn't do it in the first place.
when he didn't do it in the first place,
That's-
when he did not engage
He
the
conceded.
electorate.
Well, and that is the risk that I think
Yeah.
I'm sure they've got some smart. I know we've talked about this
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Surely, with all that money they raised, what, 10 million? How much did they spend? I
Yeah.
forget. And plus,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
put all the money together, surely there's some smart people in that room.
Yeah.
You know, that have. I'm almost kind of embarrassed to say this, but I'm not. I need to just go ahead and say it because I have to watch myself.
Yeah.
Just like we said, who tells him to keep saying as a Marine, as a Marine, as a Marine? Surely someone in the room has either pulled that and said
That's-
that works
yeah,
well,
yeah.
or there's got to be
We're-
also
we're,
someone else.
we're done with that message.
Yes,
Everybody knows. You
and
can
so-
you can stop now.
so-
Now talk about something else.
Exactly. So surely there's someone in the room that is saying, "Okay, Dan, it's
Yeah.
time to kind of stop
Yeah.
milking that one. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
let's move to something different." Yes.
So-
So I guess what I'm saying is, surely there's
Yeah.
someone in the room that's also aware. This attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it open him up to,
Yeah.
if there is a primary or whatever the strategy is going to be?
Mhm.
Well, that's great that you finally started attacking, but that's not the way you were during your regular election.
Yeah.
What
Is this-
changed?
Yeah,
Yeah,
is
what
this
changed?
is this the type of person? Which one are we going to get?
Right. And are we going to see a campaign that reverts back to issues?
Yeah.
That I would like to see. I mean, that's where I feel strongest.
Sure.
Right. That would benefit me. So if their strategy is to say no, we're just going to attack Mark. You know, we're just going to be not the other guy. That's our strategy, and we're just going to rely on a couple of little resume points. I was a Marine. I went to Duke.
Do
You
you-
know,
Could
I'm a young guy with a family.
Yeah.
Go on.
Can I play the devil's advocate here?
Yes,
Please.
absolutely.
Considering all that we have discussed now,
Mhm.
considering the fact that he conceded,
Mhm.
considering the fact that he retracted it,
Yeah,
and with all the hoopla and all the activity that's going on with
Yeah.
possibly there being another election, could it be that he now thinks that he actually stands a chance to win, and he's being a little more vocal when he wasn't before, or somebody told him same thing that you're
Yeah.
talking about, Jeff.
yeah,
You weren't vocal before. Why you being vocal now?
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I wanted to also state for the record that this type of nefarious activities that are going on with another party,
Mhm.
it's not part of our democracy.
Sure.
It hurts us all,
Mhm.
regardless of
Yep.
party.
Yeah,
It hurts us all
Yeah.
because when you have to keep going back to re-elect someone or running what happens to the work that needs to be done in those districts?
Sure.
it's expensive. It's
Yeah.
this
You
is a
understand?
this is a
Yeah.
burden on
Now-
the taxpayers.
Your original question was,
Who this?
who does it what? Who does it affect?
Yes.
Yeah,
It affects us,
yeah,
the taxpayers, the
Yeah.
constituency. And I think we as a community
Mhm.
need to be a little more boisterous about
Sure.
that and ask questions on shows like this.
Sure.
Now, why haven't either one of those individuals answered your call?
they're not responsive.
Stop.
Yeah, yeah. I pointed out on Just Beat This program
Yes.
last week that you know, when I pass out my card to people, my phone number is on it.
Yes.
Sure.
And people can call me. And believe me, I've gotten calls, and I've been on a phone call for an hour and a half with a woman and then her husband and her again. And then they call me. So I've been through this where I get calls from constituents. So I have a little bit of a taste of what it could open up for the other candidates.
Yes.
So I understand maybe their hesitancy
Sure.
to be that directly accessible. Having said that, once January 3rd rolls around, as a voter, if you got a problem, if you're a vet,
Mm-hmm.
one of the 5 vets a day
Exactly.
that calls Robert Pittinger's office, who are you
There's-
going to call now? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, again, we mentioned
Sure.
Becker, who's
Yeah.
good on, who's in Pittinger's office. Perhaps he will be there, and perhaps he will still be taking the calls. But there might be other issues that come up that people are going to just not have recourse to,
Well, I
and
think
they're
that-
going to have an unorganized.
Sure,
Yeah.
and that was actually to your point. Union County this week, I think was either Monday or whatever. Their county
Yeah.
commission had voted
Yeah.
a resolution
Mhm.
to ask the Board of Elections to certify this because of the fact that all of our 8 counties coming January 3rd
Yeah.
will be without representation if they don't seat someone, which they're obviously not going to see
Wow.
that
That's
time.
right.
So. Does that hurt Charlotte? Does it hurt Cumberland County?
Yeah.
It definitely hurts the rural areas.
Mhm.
So not only are we as constituents of the 9th Congressional District damaged because of what's going on, not only
Yeah.
is our brand being damaged, once
Yeah.
again, we went through
Yeah.
the Pittenger
Yeah.
scandal, now we're going through this
Mhm.
scandal.
Mhm.
Now we don't have a representation.
Yeah.
And we talked about last time, by the time that whoever takes seat, they're not gonna take seat until probably April,
Mhm.
June, which means they only really go about 6, 7 months and they gotta run all over again for a
Yeah.
new election.
Yeah.
So we've already lost any voice in Washington D.C. for this district. So that's another show, but I do think that's an important question.
That is,
Was
yeah.
this worth? Of course, you know you're yes, it's worth to stand up for democracy and so forth. But was the calculation of the North Carolina Democratic Party to kind of, who I think knew about this all along, they were just waiting to when to play their hand. Was it worth the disruption to have no voice just to possibly win a seat? But I think most people, I'll say to get back to this again, I appreciate the fact that people have, as Mark Harris said in his interview on WBTV on Friday night, I believe, that the Democratic Party have been circling their wagons around Dan McCready and doing that.
Yeah.
The Republican Party in North Carolina seems to have pretty much abandoned Mark Harris, and there are a lot of opportunities that they could be doing not only for fundraising, but also for also attacking Dan McCready. Because even though it seems like Dan McCready is fighting for democracy, no one has even seen him in public.
Yeah.
It's all social media stuff and a couple of Facebook, whatever. No one has. It's the same Dan McCready.
Yeah, yeah.
We haven't seen him at Democratic Women events. We haven't seen him at any community events. It is the holidays,
Right.
but at the same
That's no
time,
excuse.
well, of
Yeah.
course we know that. But I do think that is something that the Republican Party can very easily start saying. Dan, if you were so concerned about democracy,
No.
after he said he was at Disney World with his family when he found out about this. Where are you? Why aren't you out there now?
Yeah, I'm not as concerned necessarily about that sort of immediate
Yeah.
response to what's going on in the media. And from my perspective, because it's a small campaign.
Sure.
We've got to be careful about how we use the platform that we do have.
Sure.
We can't be scrambling around reacting to things all the time. We got to be fairly measured in what we do. So I'm okay with people
Sure.
sort of sitting back and waiting. So I'm not putting a lot of blame on Mark Harris for just saying, "Hey,
No, neither am I.
let's let the chips."
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying Dan's a bad guy for keeping
No,
his
I think
base
they're both-
agitated, right?
Yeah.
And sort
I'm
of
glad-
and
that's a good
sending-
word to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and just he's raising money.
Sure.
He's keeping his base agitated. He's not saying a lot, which is a continuation of what he was doing in the
It's the same Dan
general.
McCready that we saw before.
So
Yeah.
so that is while that's a personal irritant to me, I also believe
And
it's
a lot
sort
of
of
people.
it's sort of and I think it's a campaign faux pas that's going to come back to haunt him.
I will not disagree with you.
Yeah.
And I know the Democratic people watch
Yeah.
us and
Yeah.
watch us and watch
Yeah.
all of us.
Hi.
And
You got my numbers.
yes, and I know that, and I also know the Mark
Call
Harris
me.
people watch us and the things that I've said in the past because they've used that in their attacks towards Dan McCready.
Yeah.
And when I said some of the things that I've said, which we can back up in the primary, I would have hoped that Dan McCready would have taken those things and prepared himself because he knew if I was going to attack him on those issues,
Yeah.
he knew they were going to attack him, especially with the windmill
Yeah.
gate, with
Yeah.
the amount of money that he donated to get his tax subsidies.
Yeah.
All of that stuff
Yeah.
is not new.
Mm.
And so I hope that they're watching this and they're sitting there going, we need to prepare for
Yeah.
whatever the case. But that comes to the point about fundraising because I was curious about this.
Yeah.
Dan McCready is in a very advantageous situation because he is trying to raise money and he's raising money like crazy over the last week, 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Other candidates, if there's a primary, can't. I don't know how they're going to have to get some type of special opinion from the FEC because does that money go towards a special election? Does that go towards a 2018 limits? And if there is not a primary, does that go towards? Where does that money go? You
Yeah.
can't just. There was December 5th was the deadline to cut your campaign money off unless you
Yeah.
have debts and so forth.
Yeah.
How does that money? That's going to be a very
Yeah,
Is it
that's a
transferred?
question.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
is it
because
used?
you can't roll it over. I know
And
that.
I think it would depend on when you raised it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. But his emails are specifically saying
Yeah.
we need to build our not war chest, but he's saying we need to be prepared. We need to get ready. We're raising money, and a lot of his money's coming from small donations. It'd be interesting to see.
Right. And the
if
fact
this-
that he is
yeah.
spending on advertising right now.
Yes.
Yes.
So
So
I
they
don't know how
anticipate. They
that-
anticipate
Yeah.
a win.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
you're not going to be raising money to that effect.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Well-
But I wanted to digress to
Yeah.
briefly, and we could get back to the
Sure.
point at hand
Yeah.
about something that you alluded to, and
Mhm.
so did you, Jeff, and that's that void that we're going to have
Mhm.
because there's no person actually elected to the position,
Mhm.
i.e., our president
Mhm.
shutting down the government. It reminds me of that same situation.
Sure.
Because people that work for the federal government weren't going to get paid, especially
Exactly.
in high positions.
Yeah.
Right.
So it creates a crisis
Mhm.
that we don't need in America
Yeah.
right now.
Mhm.
We just don't need it.
Yeah.
And when you bring it down to the law level of government, which
Sure.
is the state, it affects us the same way.
But Tony, yeah, that's a good question, and this is why I am wondering. I don't understand. I mean, I understand because it's more political and it's the North Carolina Democratic Party. I don't really think they think Dan McCready's going to be able to win again. I mean, I do think that most people think the way this seat is R+8 that it'll be a low turnout election. That
Yeah.
if Mark Harris gets his evangelical base, they're going to win. Union County is really the key. They can get Union County. Dan McCready didn't really bring to the table any base other than people who just didn't like Pittenger, or Mark Harris's religious views
Right.
or Donald Trump. So there's not a lot of people, and that's one of the reasons it's very difficult on social media or whatever to find anybody that says anything other than I like Dan McCready. They don't tell you why they would vote for Dan McCready. They just tell you they like him. There's no substance. I like
Yeah.
him because he fights for Medicare for all.
Yeah.
I like him because of
Yeah.
the. So he doesn't.
What issues does he stand for?
Well,
Right,
that's
right.
that's I think what people.
That's the whole general
the whole
election.
general-
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think that when you don't, he doesn't have really a base to bring to the table. There's a lot of people around the country that like him, but there's not a base in Robeson County that supports him. There's not a base in Union County other than some indivisible line, people. There's not really a base in Mecklenburg County. Most of the people are party chairperson and so forth that has supported him for a long time. They can't even vote in this election. It's more anecdotal support. Jeff Jackson endorsed him, can't vote in this, whatever.
Yeah.
So I just don't think he can bring the base, which is why I can understand why he's trying to raise money, is to prepare for a primary. He won't say it, but he's preparing for a primary because I do think the only
Well, his
way.
actions are indicative of that.
Yes.
He, he wants to scare the opposition.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Did you guys hear that this another contender? They're supposed
Well-
to. Pittenger is supposed to, if there's a re-election.
well, there's
On
on
their-
both
on their-
sides.
on both sides?
Yeah, on
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
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 Does anybody dare want to speak to that? Well, we know from the Observer article, which is always true because they do such great 2-week late research, Jim Worrell, and that all they do is
Yeah.
reprint whatever someone
Then
else
they'll
is talking
CNN.
about. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's talks about maybe Kenny Smith. There's
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Commissioner
Matt Ridenour, yeah.
Matt, which I think would be an excellent.
Yeah,
candidate.
yeah.
I mean,
I like Matt. Yeah.
Matt
Yeah.
Reitenhauer,
Yeah.
right,
Oh.
if I'm pronouncing this right.
Yeah.
They would be very, very. They would first of all, it would force Dan McCready or whoever wins that primary to focus on issues because all he's doing, he focused on the servant-lovered issue and Mark Harris's radical evangelical views on gays and allegedly women, but never really on any issues. So he's not going to have that with Matt. He's going to have to actually talk about issues, and that would be hard for, I think, Dan McCready. Those of us who've been in the same room and spoken, Dan McCready's not a good debater.
Well, he couldn't answer your questions.
Well, he can answer very many people's questions. Other than I'm a
He
Marine.
doesn't want to be in the same room.
I
with
didn't
me.
fight it.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
fight for
yeah,
democracy and this,
Yeah.
all that.
Well,
stuff.
I thought initially and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought initially the stories were that the primary's already been certified, so the government can't really go back and say we need to redo the primary
Sure.
unless there's a higher threshold that they've got to get beyond, other than other than
Sure.
just the tainting and the unfairness and
I
the
think
improprieties.
I think that is the question that
Yeah.
everyone is. It depends on what side you're looking at. If you're looking at the Democratic side, they got this hashtag no primary, which to me goes completely against democracy. If you really want a new election, wouldn't you want a fair election for everyone?
That's what democracy is all about.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so when the Democratic women were doing this, in Mecklenburg County, were doing this hashtag no women, well, their charter is to try to encourage women to vote. So why wouldn't they want a new primary? Have some women maybe run against Dan McCready.
Well,
maybe have him talk about
look,
the
I
and if
don't.
Dan McCready wins, he wins. He killed me.
I don't think
You know?
I don't think anyone's against that idea. I think that
Well, then why the hashtag no primary?
no, just
Yeah.
the thing is,
Yeah.
we did go through the primary,
Yes,
right?
That's right.
It was certified.
Sure.
They didn't find a taint, right? They didn't find that it was improper.
Sure.
They looked at the numbers. They said, well, these numbers are kind of fishy, but
Sure.
these numbers always look kind of fishy, so we're going to go ahead and certify it. And so they've, in order to overturn that,
Sure.
my belief, and I'm not an expert in this area, but my belief is the Board of Elections, as well as the state legislature, they have a much higher
Sure.
standard
Okay.
to
Yeah.
overturn it.
This is really complicated.
In this
Imagine-
case, in the fact that the general wasn't certified,
Sure.
that means now they got time to look at it,
Sure.
and they've got a couple of avenues. Again, I'm not an expert. Everything I know, I learned from Twitter, which is one of my grievances.
And we're going really, really long here,
Okay.
and we want to kind of stay within
Well,
our
we'll
time
keep it
period.
tight,
Yeah, but those are
Yeah.
very good points and questions, and because this meeting is not until January 11th, maybe we can do it in
Road trip.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can't even really do anything other than just kind of talk
Yeah.
like probably most people are
Yeah.
until we know what happens on January the
Yeah.
11th.
Right.
But I guess what I understand a little bit of what Union County commissioners were talking about, and I know it's hard for Democrats to kind of accept this, but I almost wanted to. There's a part of me that wanted to say, why don't we just seat Harris? If there is wrongdoing, do what we would do with any other congressional person and investigate it, put him in jail, whatever, and then whatever the rules are. But right now it looks 99.9% like something happened,
Yeah.
but they have to prove that Mark Harris actually knew that was
Right.
happening. That's really, really.
He's
Robert-
not gonna
Robert
hire. He's
Pittenger-
not gonna hire an illegal guy.
Exactly.
Right.
Robert Pittenger
Yeah.
went through 2 election cycles under
Under FBI
ethics
investigation.
FBI investigation
Yeah.
and still made it out.
Yeah.
And was so I'm not
That's
suggesting that then we would have representation.
Yeah.
Right,
You know,
right.
and I
At
don't
least
know.
the government of the
Yes.
state still
Yeah.
moves
Yes,
forward.
yeah, and then people in Union County, Mecklenburg County, whether you like the
Yeah.
person or not,
Yeah.
we'd at least have a voice at the table in Congress. We'd have
That's right.
constituent services. We would
Yeah.
have all of those things, and I don't. To me, that just seems like something.
No, and
that we should-
advocacy is important when it comes
Yeah.
to appropriations.
Sure.
If you don't have somebody sitting at the table,
That's right.
you lose in the
That's
long
right.
run because once
Yeah.
the vote is passed,
You-
it's dead.
If you don't get invited to the lunch, you are the lunch.
You are. I like
Oh, that's
that.
good. We're going to stop talking about this, but
Okay.
I just want to add that if it is just an election, which we'll find out, I think it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
I just can't see how Mark Harris is going to lose if he can bring his base in.
No, I agree.
That's
Yeah,
kind of what
agree.
and I'm sure you will
Yeah.
attract some base,
Yeah.
some other people
That's true, yes,
as
yes.
well,
I
or the
certainly
other
hope so.
candidates.
I just one last thing is I do temp contract work, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
In case
Okay.
anybody's interested in
Alrighty.
temp,
Excellent.
a temp contractor in this job.
Okay, excellent. And then also, I will say that what we have been hearing from the grapevine is that Dan's going to have a very difficult time in the rural areas, the heavily Democratic areas, because what I'm hearing is that there are some concerns from very active Democrats in Robeson County specifically of how Dan spent his money in Robeson County and where that money went. And that was kind of what I have been talking about, but I'm going to stop talking about it because it's
Okay.
not talking about it because, like I said, when you were talking about the community meeting that was happening and people were saying, I gave this person so and so,
Yeah.
my whole thing is, how does that happen if the Democrats are paying attention to these people?
If
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens because they're not paying attention to these people, and I think that the voters in those areas, they're smart enough to know you didn't pay attention to me then. Now you're suddenly going to want to pay attention to
Yeah.
me, and I do know that there are some concerns about, and we've asked this also. Why hasn't Dan McCready had been full disclosure and transparent with the money he spent in Robeson and Bladen County? All of the money that was funded to the DCCC to get out the vote. Where did that money? Who did he hire to get out the vote efforts? And there's talks right now in Robeson County that money there was a lot of money
Yeah.
went to certain individuals and it went into their pockets.
Yeah.
It didn't go, and so that's the big conversation right now in Robeson County. And some of those are elected officials, and I think there's some concern about whether that's going to be brought out. But
Their campaigns are all about sprinkling
yes,
hundreds of thousands
Yes.
of dollars, and which is why it's kind of an ugly business, you know.
It is.
And I say this as a
nothing
I think
illegal,
that-
nothing illegal
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
the state or whatever. But there were concerns about people
Yeah.
in Robeson County,
Yeah.
and they're being very vocal.
Yeah.
They're actually saying this on social
Mhm.
media.
Mhm.
Where did the money go, Dan?
Yeah.
That you spent? Who got that money?
Mhm.
And what they're saying is because that money, it was just, you hire people who you think you're going to get, and
Yeah.
you pay people if you think you're going to get their support and you get their endorsements.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's just politics.
yeah, it's not.
I mean, I did the calculation for the general, and
Sure.
it's $77 a vote.
That's crazy.
So if he raises another $5 million
Yeah.
for another perhaps primary,
Yeah.
but in a general election, let's say he raises another
Sure.
$5 million, that'll be over $100 a vote.
Sure.
Because he got 140,000 votes, rounding, 139,
Well,
138, something like that.
Anyway,
Anyway,
at what point do you realize that it's a bad investment?
Yeah. So I had
You think we would-
I did much
you-
better. I think I paid 50 cents a vote.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah, I mean, you think that we
I didn't.
would
I
have
didn't
learned.
even trigger FEC funding.
Democrats
because-
love to spend tons of money on people who are bad candidates,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't spend money on people who are better candidates. Anyway, All right. So
we don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah,
but we'll
we-
be there. January 11th, we'll have a big party.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So let's talk about the constitutional quote of the week, which is
You've got a constitutional quote
yes.
of the week,
I
and you
article
even marked the page. So you are
and we'll let you,
you are production
read it.
genius. Amendment 2?
Amendment 2.
Okay. Amendment 2.
Excuse me.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Well, do we even want to discuss
This
the
is
Second
tough.
Amendment?
Well, people were asked me during the campaign about the guns, and I want to state for the record that, my party and most of the people in my party in the state are all, 99% very strong Second Amendment gun advocates. People on my campaign own guns. Everybody in my neighborhood owns guns.
And
Many of my in-laws own guns and use them. And I'm not a big gun fan. And I once had this conversation with the Larry Sharp, who ran for governor in New York as Libertarian candidate, and we're both urban, and we just didn't feel like having a gun with kids around, sometimes temperamental kids, was
I
really
agree with that.
really an appropriate thing to do. So I've never been a person that's been a strong advocate for that at home in my particular environment. Having said that, my campaign workers, they're talking about their Berettas and Glocks and all this kind of
Do you
stuff.
have any opinion on the Second Amendment? Do you ever want to?
I pretty much feel the way you
Yeah.
feel, Jeff.
Yeah.
I've never been a gun owner.
Mhm.
I've never thought that it was something that was imperative to have in your home.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I come
Yeah.
from New York.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem that I have with it, everything that says here in this Second Amendment is fine, but I think individuals
Sure.
read it the wrong way.
Sure. Yeah. They interpret it.
This is
As-
talking about government.
Yeah.
This is talking about bearing arms. If the government goes astray,
Yeah.
how do you defend the government?
And that's a,
How do you defend against tyrannical government?
You understand?
Yes.
And I think people
Yeah.
read it the wrong way.
Yes.
I mean, to each his interpretation.
And this
but
is
Yeah.
This is in full disclosure, and everyone who has been following, probably all of us.
Yeah.
I'm a very active member in Moms Demand Action and for Gun Reform Now and gun liability insurance and gun protections, and the great work that they do at Moms Demand Action, and we supporting gun sense candidates. And we've got several of them. Christy Clark is one of the great ones that just got elected here in North Carolina. And I appreciated the fact that you and I are so different on this issue, but we have been able to have an adult conversation when you debated me during the primary, during my primary, but also you had the courtesy to attend a Moms Demand Action meeting. And spoke with those ladies, and they were very appreciative that you were at least gave them the courtesy to attend. And I say that because Mark Harris did not, neither did Dan McCready.
Yeah.
And I think that does speak to. I hope that speaks to people when they're looking at people to support. And I'm not saying
That's
that,
right.
but
That's right.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
is that thank you for at least
Yeah. Well,
having the conversation.
it's
I'm hoping
important.
will sway you.
Yeah, and it's not, these issues, when something like this happens, it's not just some other group of people that want to talk
it's
to.
all-
These are people in your family, in your neighborhood, where you're thinking, well, what is it that we should do? How should we think about this problem?
Yeah.
What sort of risks are there, really? Do we
Because
want,
I've had, I mean, I've had this conversation at watching a football game with a gentleman I watch with, and who's a gun collector and an advocate, believes in no, that we got too many laws, and so forth. And we've had a very, adult conversation about how we differ, and I've got family members that are hunters and so forth, and. So this is a very important issue that we've got to talk about, and I appreciate at least you coming to the table and everyone coming to the table to talk.
Just as an added point, I believe it is a good segue
Sure.
toward further conversation
Yeah,
about
exactly.
about unlimited government and tyrannical government, when government gets out of hand, when
I think this,
you know,
this
and that's
not to-
that's an important discussion to have
not to
too.
cut you off, Jeff.
Sure.
But,
Ka-ching.
Our producer's already telling me.
no, I
that
didn't
we-
want to. I didn't want to lose my thought on this.
Sure.
Here, there's a terminology
30 seconds.
that
Uh-huh.
a well-regulated militia,
That's right.
and people are using that to come up with their own little
Their own
militias
verb, yeah.
for their own
Yeah.
purposes,
Yeah.
being necessary to the security of a free state.
Sure.
Okay.
People are taking that in the wrong way. I can see if our government was in peril,
Sure.
if we, well, is it?
Well, that's you know, we're going to table that only
Yeah.
because I don't want us to end this on a downer. So few days before Christmas and the holidays, and those who are
I'm with you.
celebrating Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, and this is a great segue into Festivus. So as we conclude our show today, we want to talk about and we want to celebrate Festivus, and also those who are out there who are actually celebrating Festivus. And if you're celebrating Festivus this Wednesday at 1 o'clock, then you're probably celebrating it with wine or something,
Yeah.
because you know, I'm just saying. All right, so part of Festivus, and I gave you guys a copy,
Yeah.
the traditions of Festivus.
Yeah.
So if you celebrate Festivus, for those who don't know, you have to have a Festivus pole. It's an aluminum pole, and Frank Costanza had a
George Costanza.
George Costanza, that's right. There's also a Festivus dinner that you have with your family members, I believe. And then there is a errand of grievance, which we're going to do right now, a feats of strength, and Festivus miracles. All right, so those are the 5 areas. So we're going to go into the airing of grievances for Festivus. So we'll start with Tony. I looked over there. Air any grievance you have. I don't really know.
We can go back and forth.
Yeah, we can go back.
Yeah,
Do you have any grievances you want to air? I guess you're supposed to air your grievance, and you're.
And it can be a gripe or a,
This is a great idea when we thought about it earlier, but I don't know.
But the biggest peeve that I've got is
That's what I would say.
is
tell us.
You have a bone to pick.
Is the way that the government is being ran, the divisiveness, where our government is at this moment. People hate is a very strong thing.
Sure.
I don't even use the word hate because I believe that if you can hate, you could kill. So I don't even use it. I never let my kids use it.
Sure.
For you to say I hate you and say it with a little bit of anger in it, I don't like that.
Yeah.
As a school psychologist,
Mhm.
I don't appreciate the use of the word hate. So to see some of the things that are happening in our country when it comes to racism and hate, I have a problem with that.
Sure.
This is supposed to be a country, land of the free and home of the brave. What happened to that? And that's my
well,
view.
then let me just follow up with a similar grievance, because I talked to Chispita about this last week, and we've talked about this before when we have discussions about immigration, and one of the things that's been going on, and I think actually this predates Trump. This has been going on for, you know, at least a decade, maybe longer. Maybe I didn't see the signs earlier, but Americans have become very anti-foreigner, and they're very, you know, the term is xenophobic,
Sure.
right? And they're not. When I was in school, you know, people were talking about wanting to go to Europe, wanting to go around the world, wanting to learn other languages and have these cultural exchanges, and people were running off to
Yes.
college to do that kind of thing. And even when this was at the height of the Cold War, you know, in the early 70s, when we had these, you know, dark enemies, but people were still had this spirit of, you know, we want people to come in, and we want to go out there, and we want to have these exchanges with people around the world. And I'm not seeing a bunch of kids that have that same frame of mind. That's one
Sure.
thing that bothers me. But the other side of that is that here we are in 2018,
Sure.
and we've got this rampant anti-other approach
Sure.
to
Which is
people who
sad.
come, which is extremely sad. And it's not just about, you know, Hispanics.
Sure.
It's also about Russians. It's also
Sure.
about Middle
Yeah.
Easterners. So
Do you
anyway,
think-
that's
and
mine.
this is
that's
probably-
that's my grievance.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that,
Yeah.
and that's why I think it's so important for us to continue to teach history
Yeah.
and civics
Mhm,
classes in schools, because we understand, you know, what you said.
Mm.
The same things were I probably happened. Maybe you know,
Mhm.
since you're from New York, you know, the Italians were discriminated against. The Irish were discriminated against.
Yeah.
But I really do think, and I saw this. I don't know what's the gentleman that does the new Daily Show on that took on Comedy Central
Noah
from South
something?
Africa.
Is it-
He has a show on Netflix, that's
Yeah.
special on Netflix, which was wonderful. He talks about his take on coming here and talking about racism.
Some of the guy that's there now.
Yes.
Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
brilliant, smart
Yes,
comedian,
yes.
but really
I believe he's African,
great.
isn't he?
Yes, and he talks about how in America they seem to be it seems to be this time where everyone's so anti-immigrant or anti-foreigner,
Yeah.
and he has this line where he says, if that's the case, then you can't eat immigrant food.
Yeah.
It has to be bland. It has to be
Yeah.
this. You
Yeah.
can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You either like. He says the same people going, "Yeah, America, America. I'm glad it's Taco Tuesday." You know, and it's a really funny bit that he does. And but that's interesting you say
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
I've always been probably for the last 20 years at least in the hotel business. I've been a big fan of the millennials. The millennials, I believe, because they are the new majority, or they have been. I think in 2016 they took over in November or something.
Yeah.
2016, in the workplace, but also a voting block. They just haven't gotten their voting numbers up. I really have a lot of faith in our millennials. That to me, they are the baby boomers that have the guts to actually do the things. I see them. They're diverse. I do think that they are changing us. And those who don't want to change, the Gen X people like myself, who just don't want to change or stuck in the 80s,
Yeah.
and they are changing us because we have to, or we're just gonna, go by the wayside. And I do think that I hope that that we've reached the pendulum,
The pendulum.
keeps going, that we're hopefully coming down. And that's my errand of grievance, is that I do think that as a Democrat, that we have not. We've done a really good job of attacking Trump for the last 2 years,
Yeah.
and it's not any different than people did against President Obama. And that's one of the things I think that fuels people's, because I remember when people were attacking the Tea Party, everybody was attacking President. It seemed like it was done so, he couldn't do anything right, President Obama, without he bowed to the Saudi Arabia guy, and he did this and whatever, and then it was like, oh, now that we have an opportunity to pay back. We don't want to be like them. So my grievance is, there are a couple of things that happened over the last week that we should applaud President Trump, because it was
That's right.
under his,
That's right.
and it's the first time I've said President Trump in a long time. I've said President 45. So out of respect, I'm going to say President Trump. We got a Syria deal.
Syria,
right?
absolutely. Let's toast
Yeah,
to that.
yeah. Salute to
because-
that. Anyone who's
because-
following, it's
yeah.
under his watch.
Yeah.
Now, we had the conversation before the show.
Yeah.
Was he actually
Fantastic.
making the calls? It's under his watch.
Yeah.
He gets to sign the bill.
Yeah.
We also got the, what is the reform, prison reform? or-
Prison for
Yeah. First step.
I put it on Facebook.
Sure. That's been done, which was
Under his watch.
Which hopefully that will be signed, and
Yeah.
it's under his
Yeah.
watch. So there are some things that,
Cannabis moving forward.
yeah, cannabis is, medical cannabis moving forward. So, you can still disagree with President 45 and still believe he needs to be impeached, which is what I personally believe. I'm not saying that he will get impeached. I'm just saying that I want whoever represents the 9th Congressional District to say they will vote to start an investigation to impeach him. It's not a hypothetical question. It's something that we all know. And if he's done nothing wrong, it's nothing to worry about. And so you can still want him to be impeached, but also say, I'm glad these things are happening because this does, these are good things that we should be celebrating.
My only question is, if he hasn't done anything wrong, why are you so opposed to the investigation?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
It's that simple. But I wanted to, again, digress briefly
Well, would you want to do your job under constant investigation?
No, no.
I mean, there has to be grounds.
Well, if I have actually not done anything, then the whole investigation would go, and probably would have been over with now.
Sure.
If he would have just left it alone, which he didn't.
Yeah.
The constant tweets just instigated
Sure.
more investigation. That's my take on it. Now, I agree.
You can prolong your own investigation by not copying to the FBI at the beginning.
Well,
no. I feel my grandmother would always say this.
Yeah.
You say you didn't do it, but you're constantly saying you didn't do it. So if you didn't do it, why are you arguing about it?
well, Tony, this is I completely agree with you. So this is what Ruth was talking about the last 2 times we had this show.
Yeah.
Ruth was saying the exact same thing. She was saying, just as we have that standard for President 45, why did the Democratic Party not have the same standard for ourselves? In other words, if you believe, and she was not really talking about Democrats, she was talking about the Democratic Party. If you didn't do anything wrong yourself, then be full disclosure. Dan McCready should come. Dan McCready's accusing Mark Harris of this. But Dan McCready has never said, this is what I've done. And so what I'm saying is we have to hold both, we have to be fair with how we treat everyone. So if we're going to be accusing, which is what's happening, Mark Harris for hiring a known criminal, which is the words that they're using, Dan McCready needs to come out and say, I have not hired a known criminal. He hasn't said that. And, I mean, was anybody on his... I'm just saying is that we just want... I think most Americans just want both parties to if you're going to say this about one, at least admit that you're not perfect yourself. I don't know if that...
Well, we can...
The party is perfect.
Yeah, we can table this for another
because
day, but because I've got my objections to the ongoing investigations, the perpetual investigations, really what they're down to. But we can, excuse me, we can agree to talk
we got
about
another
it.
show for it.
Yes, so we are running over, and I want to thank everyone, and I apologize for running over because your time is valuable, and that means you get to watch this later on. I want to thank Jeff Scott once again for being here, and Merry Christmas. I know
Merry
you've got
Christmas,
travel
Jeff.
plans.
Well, thank you, Tony.
And
Thank you.
Mr.
Merry
Foreman,
Christmas,
thank
brother.
you for taking time out of your busy day and life to come here. And we'll hopefully have another show before the new year ends. Hopefully Miss Ruth Perez can join us again, and maybe we'll even finally get our conservative point of view. You're probably as conservative as we've got here, or maybe Matthew Rittenhauer. Maybe we can convince him. I think he lives.
Yeah, he does. He's not too far.
Yeah, he's not too far. Got a lot of
Yeah.
great neighbors around here. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas or holiday or whatever Festivus, whatever you're celebrating. From my family to yours, please be safe. Realize that kids don't need that many toys, but adults do.
That's
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Good show. Went a little long.